Mom, when do I get a dad I actually like? The microphone fed Chloe's small voice through the chandeliered ballroom as if the question belonged to the program. It didn't. The gala had just fallen quiet for the paddle raise, and now 100 glasses hovered mid-air the way birds pause before deciding to flee. On the stage, Madison Hale did not blink. Her dress was silver, her posture ironed flat by years of earnings calls and boardroom ambushes, but the question landed where armor ends behind the ribs. A few people laughed because they didn't know what else to do. Others pretended to check their phones. Someone whispered, "Is this a bit?" Madison stepped away from the podium and crouched to Chloe's height. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "you and I talk about big things at home." Chloe held the mic closer at 10, unafraid of acoustics or etiquette. "We do, but home doesn't listen like this room does." The ballroom inhaled as one. A man in a tux at table 7, an investor who'd once told Madison her company was too emotional for the market, leaned to his date. "This is why founders shouldn't bring kids," he hissed. Forgetting cameras loved that sentence. The MC fluttered back toward the podium, but Madison lifted a palm that said, "Not yet." She turned her face to the crowd, kept her voice even. "My daughter asked a brave question," she said, "and I'm not going to punish bravery." A murmur rolled across the donors like static. Chloe tugged Madison's sleeve. "You said love isn't a business plan, but you also said you hire people who fit our family. I want to help." Madison's laugh was small and real. "I did say that." She rose, took the mic, and her CEO voice came back measured clean. "Most of you know I was widowed when Chloe was 6. You also know grief doesn't end. It changes jobs. It stops knocking on the door and starts living in the pantry. Tonight, my 10-year-old asked me in front of all of you if she can help me choose who joins our family someday." A camera light flared. Another phone rose, apologetic. The MC whispered to a producer. The event planner mouthed, "Please land this plane." Madison kept going. "To be clear, Chloe is not hiring a father. I am not hosting auditions for my heart." She let them chuckle. "But I am listening to my daughter. And for the next 4 weeks, I'll be arranging a few honest, ordinary moments outside of ballrooms like this, moments where Chloe and I can meet good men in daylight, without glitter, without pressure, and see how we feel. She gets a voice. I keep the decision. That's what family is: voice and responsibility sharing the table." At table 2, a lawyer nodded despite himself. At the press row in the back, a journalist underlined the phrase, "voice and responsibility." Chloe leaned into the microphone one last time. "And there has to be ice cream," she said, "because you can tell everything about a person by how they order ice cream." The ballroom laughed. The tension exhaled. Madison pressed a kiss to Chloe's temple and stood again the script she'd prepared, now a paper airplane in a hurricane. "Now," she said, "let's raise money for homes that don't have to ask these questions in public." The paddle raise soared. People gave, because scandal makes generosity feel like wisdom. Madison did her part, smiled when appropriate, posed for photos with prominent donors. But when the speeches ended and music washed the room, she slipped to the edge of the balcony overlooking Midtown, the city glittering like a jewelry case no one can close. Chloe padded up beside her. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. Madison shook her head. "I'm proud of you. I didn't mean to interrupt. It felt like if I didn't say it, then I wouldn't say it at all. That's how truth behaves." Madison draped her shawl around Chloe's shoulders. "Truth needs a microphone or it loses its nerve." Chloe leaned into her side. "I miss him less when I think about what could be next." Madison swallowed. "Me too." She rested her chin on her daughter's hair and tried to remember when hope had stopped being a betrayal and started being an option. Behind them, the balcony door clicked. The MC's voice arrived first. "Press is organizing downstairs," he said gently. "We can decline, but they'll run with whatever angle they already wrote in their heads." Madison looked at Chloe. "One rule," she said. "No one learns anything about you that you don't want them to know. This is our story, not their buffet." Chloe squared her shoulders. "Got it." They descended into the camera garden. Questions flew like confetti with teeth. Ms. Hale, are you launching a dating show? Is this healthy for a child? Are you saying money can buy a family? Madison lifted a hand for quiet. I'm saying children deserve a say in the shape of their lives. I'm saying grief is real and love is careful. I'm saying the only format is decency. A reporter with sharp eyeliner raised her voice above the others. Criteria, Ms. Hale. If men are listening tonight, what should they know? Madison considered. Kindness is non-negotiable, integrity under stress, humor that isn't a weapon, and a willingness to eat ice cream in winter. She smiled toward Chloe. We'll meet people like normal people do, coffee parks, museums. No cameras, no influencers, no scorecards. What about money, someone called. Would you date below your tax bracket? Madison's smile cooled. What I won't date is arrogance. She took Chloe's hand. Good night. They were in the car when Chloe spoke again. You didn't look scared. I was terrified, Madison said. I just didn't let my face vote. Chloe laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like a small gate swinging open. Can one of the places be the Science Museum? If a man can't wonder at a dinosaur, he can't wonder at me. Madison considered, then nodded. Add it to the list. At home, the penthouse smelled like lemon and paper. On the kitchen island, 2 calendars waited, one for quarterly closings, one for Chloe's piano recitals and orthodontist appointments. Madison poured tea she wouldn't finish and opened her laptop. The board would email by dawn. HR would worry about optics. Legal would send bullet points about privacy and minors. She would answer them all, but not yet. She drafted a note to herself instead. 4-week plan. Low-key meetings, daytime public spaces. No press. Background checks, yes. Chloe's input recorded privately. Therapy, check-in, Dr. Klein, biweekly. Ordinary moments over staged ones. Chloe floated in wearing pajamas with watercolor moons. Can I sleep in your room? You can start there, Madison said. And then I will carry you back because you are a human anvil. I'm not heavy, Chloe protested, climbing onto the bed with the shameless grace of children. She looked at the city beyond the glass. Will people be mean online? Some, Madison said. But they're typing at a screen, not standing in our kitchen. Kitchen rules matter more. What are kitchen rules? We use names, not labels. We talk to faces, not profiles. And we eat ice cream in winter. Chloe grinned. You heard that. New York Madison tucked the blanket up to her daughter's chin. Tomorrow we'll make the list, she said. Not just names. The qualities that matter. What if the best person doesn't look like the best person? Then we learn to look better, Madison said. Chloe's eyes drifted. Mom. Yes, if I ask a question in a room again, and your ribs make that face, will you still let me ask it? Madison brushed hair from Chloe's forehead. That's what our house is for. Questions that make ribs make faces. A text buzzed on the nightstand, her COO, a string of question marks, and one. Are you sure? Madison typed back. I'm sure of the why. We'll make the how responsible. She set the phone down and sat in the thin hush that follows decisions. Somewhere below, a siren wrote its red line across the avenue. The city kept its pulse. She felt hers match it. In the morning, headlines would decide what tonight meant. Investors would request context. Old friends would call it brave. Others would choose a different adjective. But between the 2 calendars under the lemon air and paper smell, Madison wrote the only sentence she trusted. Let's build a life that would be safe for love to enter. She switched off the lamp. In the dark, Chloe whispered into the quiet a prayer to no one in particular, just the room itself. Let him be kind. Madison stared at the ceiling and added silently, Let me be brave enough to recognize him when he looks nothing like what I imagined. On the street, a snow flurry began, late, impatient, and perfect for ice cream in winter. By sunrise, the headlines had cooled from scandal to speculation. Inside, Hale Development's glass-walled conference room speculation had a seat at the table. 5 prospects said Nora Patel Madison's COO, sliding a folder across the polished oak. all vetted. No liabilities, no tabloid landmines, and every one of them intersects with our pipeline in a legitimate way. Vetted for the business, Madison said, not for my kitchen table. That's why we stack the deck with daylight, Nora replied. Coffee shops, museums, zero champagne, 2 therapists on speed dial, and legal gave me language for informed consent if anyone so much as breathes near a camera. Dr. Klein, their family therapist, was on speaker. Remember the ground rules? Madison, you set boundaries. Chloe gives feelings and nobody performs. Wonder is allowed. Pressure is not. Chloe sat beside Madison, small sneakers swinging above the floor. Can we see dinosaurs before we see men? She asked. We can see both, Madison said. But no, letting either bite. Chloe grinned. Nora tapped the list. Option 1. Elliot Vance. 42, attorney specializing in land use. He's witty charming and allergic to shortcuts. He also teaches mock trial at a public school on Saturdays. Pro bono, on purpose, Dr. Klein murmured through the speaker. Good sign. 2. Dr. Marcus Bell, pediatric cardiologist. Empathy for a living. He's advising a wellness center that wants to partner on our Riverside project. Chloe tilted her head. A heart doctor seems like cheating. Sometimes a good cheat, Madison said. 3. Grant Whitlow, managing partner at Whitlow Capital. He's the numbers whisperer donors try to corner at galas. If money can do a backflip, Grant taught it. Translation, Chloe said. He's very good at math and very bad at cookies. Nora smothered a laugh. 4. Luis Calder, architect, who thinks buildings should be kind to the people inside them. He grew up in a 2-bedroom with 5 siblings and never forgot it. Kind buildings, Chloe repeated, tasting the phrase. Like chairs that don't bully backs. 5. Raphael Stone, second-generation hotelier. He runs properties like orchestras, quiet hands, perfect timing. He's offering long-term housing for our Veterans Initiative. Madison exhaled. They were all decent. She could speak with any of them without her face asking for a map. The fact that each touched her work wasn't a coincidence. It was a safeguard. Love wasn't a business plan, but proximity to purpose was a sane place to start. Okay, she said. Daylight it is. No headlines, no auditions. We meet people like people. Chloe raised a hand as if in class. And ice cream non-negotiable. They built a calendar that looked more like a field trip than a courtship. Coffee near the park with Elliot. A hospital tour 10 minutes tops with Dr. Bell. A public lecture on housing equity where Grant promised to listen without interrupting. A site walk with Luis, who preferred hard hats to hard sells. And lunch in a hotel lobby with Raphael where Chloe would rate the piano player's song choices. Madison sent careful invitations, real, respectful, specific. We're keeping this small, she wrote each man. No cameras. 2 humans and a child. If that sounds inconvenient, we're not a fit. By late morning, all 5 said yes. 2 days later, the first ordinary moment was a site walk, Block 17. A stretch of brick and promise where Hale Development planned a mixed-use complex ground-floor grocers, upper-floor apartments, a courtyard strung with lights that would feel like summer even in November. The frost still clung to scaffolding. Hard hats waited like white punctuation on a sawhorse. Rule 1. Luis said, handing Chloe a child-sized helmet with Heil stenciled on the side. You can ask any question. Bad questions don't exist on job sites. Chloe strapped the chin band. Okay. Why are pigeons always invited to construction? Luis nodded, solemn. Because they never sign NDAs. Chloe giggled. Madison clocked the gentle timing. Luis didn't perform. He included. They walked the perimeter, Luis explaining load paths the way you explain a secret to a friend softly. Chloe touched a column, eyes wide. So, this is bone, she said. It is, he said. The skin comes later. As they neared the freight elevator, a superintendent waved, then frowned at a beeping panel. She's been testy all morning, he said, thumbing the call button. We've got a maintenance check in 20. The gate rattled open. Madison hesitated. "We can take the stairs. Top deck is a better view," Luis said then to the superintendent. "You sure? 10 minutes tops?" He pried the door, listening the way mechanics listen to thunder. "You'll be fine." They weren't in for 10 seconds before the elevator sighed and stopped. The lights flickered. The car sighed again like a tired animal, then stilled between floors. Chloe's fingers clenched Madison's coat. The small space curled in. "It's okay," Madison said, heart slamming like it wanted out. "We're okay." Luis pressed the emergency call. Elevator car 2 stalled between 3 and 4, he told whoever was there. "Passengers inside, no injuries." "Calm." Copy a calm voice replied. "Maintenance on the way." Chloe's breath shortened. "I can't feel the edges," she whispered. Madison lowered to eye level, aware of her own pulse painting her neck. "Look at me. Count my freckles," she said, trying for light. "I earned them in boardrooms without windows." Chloe counted, then shook her head. "The air is sticky." A knuckle rapped the outer door. "Hey there," a man called through the metal. "Name's Daniel. I'm here with maintenance. You're safe." The name slid into the car like a leveler. Madison didn't know why it fit. "Who's in there?" he asked. 3, Luis called back. 1 child. "Okay, 3, Daniel said. "Tell me a number between 1 and 10. 7, Chloe whispered. "7's my lucky number too," Daniel said. 7 means we breathe like we're blowing out birthday candles. In through the nose for 4, out through the mouth for 6. "Can you help me practice?" Madison felt Chloe's grip loosen just a little. "Good," Daniel said. "Now I've got a secret. This box is a liar. It tells your brain the sky is gone, but the sky didn't leave your brain, just forgot where the door is. So we remind it. We breathe. We name 5 things we can touch." Chloe pressed her palm to the cool metal. "Metal," she said, shaky but trying. "Hard hat, Mom's sleeve, my own hand. Mr. Luis's elbow." "Excellent," Daniel said. "Now, 4 things you can hear." "The hum," Chloe said. "Your voice." "Mom's heartbeat." "Wait really fast." "We don't judge heartbeats around here," Daniel said through a small laugh that didn't minimize. "And my breath," she finished. "Perfect," he said. "Help is opening the door. You won't drop. Elevators are stubborn, not cruel." There was a clank. A grunt, the measured code of professionals versus machinery. The gate inched. Light cut a bright stripe across the floor. A crowbar bit metal, complained, and then the door slid wide enough to see a man's face, late 30s hair damp with effort, eyes careful. He wore a blue work shirt with hail stitched above the pocket and a tool belt that read like a sentence about reliability. "Hello," he said, not reaching in yet. "I'm going to get you out to the Safeway. We take it slow because slow is smart." Madison nodded relief like warmth in her knees. She lifted Chloe toward the opening. Daniel braced, not grabbing, letting Chloe choose the contact. She reached. He anchored her weight with the sort of strength that never asks you to apologize for needing it. When Chloe landed on the hallway floor, she didn't step back. She looked up at him. "You used a nice voice," she said. "I saved the mean one for broken vacuum cleaners," he said. "It's less effective on people." Luis climbed out. Madison followed Palm's stung pride intact but rearranged. She turned to Daniel. "Thank you," she said, the 2 words heavier than etiquette. He made a small shrug. "I got stuck in one when I was 8. My mom talked me out. I just borrowed her voice." Chloe considered him, then held out a hand solemn. "I'm Chloe," she said, "and for the record, 7 is my lucky number first." He shook with equal solemnity. "Daniel," he said. "I'm fine with borrowing luck, too." The superintendent bustled over with apologies, radio crackling. "She's offline till we swap the relay," he said. "Hale will comp your shoes if we scuffed them." Luis waved it away. "We're fine." Madison wanted to say something that matched the magnitude of feeling in her ribcage. Something about how leadership is exactly what Daniel had done. Gather panic, give it a job, turn it into breath, but she kept to the simple road. "Were you on your way to us?" she asked. "Or did you just appear?" "On my way to the roof," he said, half smiling. The heater likes dramatic gestures in February. Chloe looked at his tool belt. Do you fix everything? I try not to break it worse, he said. That's half the job. Madison met his eyes for a second longer than strangers usually do. There was nothing heroic about him except the exact kind of hero she'd promised herself to notice, steady, unfancy, unafraid of small rooms. Thank you, Daniel, she said again. Any time he said and meant it in the technical sense, not the poetic. As they walked back toward the stairwell, Chloe slipped her hand into Madison's. Is he on the list? She whispered. The list is for meetings, Madison whispered back. He just saved us in real life. Sometimes real life is the meeting, Chloe said. Madison smiled without showing teeth. Sometimes, she said. Behind them, Daniel knelt by the panel speaking low to the superintendent about relays and fail-safes, the kind of language that keeps buildings honest. He didn't look up again. He didn't have to. He'd already said the truest line in the hallway. We take it slow because slow is smart. That night, Madison added a new line to the calendar no one else saw. Ordinary moments note who gets smaller so a child can breathe. The next Monday, Madison walked into the headquarters lobby with the intent to keep her eyes forward, her schedule tight, and her pulse steady. But there, kneeling beside a tool cart under the Bronze Hale Development logo, was the janitor from the elevator, Daniel Brooks. He was tightening a panel on the baseboard sleeves rolled to his elbows, a pencil tucked behind one ear. The same calm energy he'd carried in the cramped elevator seemed to travel with him like a quiet song only he could hear. Chloe spotted him first. It's the 7 guy, she whispered, tugging Madison's coat. Daniel glanced up, recognized them, and stood. Morning, he said simply, wiping his hands on a rag. Madison nodded, feeling an unexpected warmth at his steady gaze. Thank you again. For the other day, he shook his head lightly. That's what I'm here for, making stuck things move again. Before Madison could reply, Chloe chimed in, We're going to my mom's office. Want to come? I don't think they let janitors crash CEO meetings, he said with a half smile. Maybe they should, Chloe answered without missing a beat. Madison caught Daniel's faint smirk, the kind that says a child just told the most accurate truth in the room. Later that morning, Madison's corner office felt too high above the street. She was in a meeting about the Riverton redevelopment deal, a flagship project on the verge of collapse over engineering issues the contractors couldn't solve. Madison, were weeks behind her project manager Paul said, spreading blueprints across the glass table. If we can't reroute the substructure supports, we lose the retail anchor. The city won't approve the revised permits without a new load plan. The structural engineer on the call shook his head. We'd need a redesign from scratch. That's 6 figures and 3 months minimum. Madison tapped a pen against the blueprints, her jaw tightening. Losing Riverton wasn't just numbers, it was housing for hundreds of families, the centerpiece of her next year's portfolio and leverage for 2 philanthropic partnerships. A knock at the door interrupted. Daniel stepped in holding a small envelope. Sorry, he said. Mailroom sent this up. Looks important. He placed the envelope on her desk, but his eyes flicked to the plans. Is that Riverton? He asked almost casually. Paul frowned. Confidential. Madison hesitated. It is. Why? Daniel glanced at the cross-section. You've got a load transfer bottleneck here, he said, pointing to the north column grid. If you swap to staggered micropiles and a stepped footing, you can carry the same load without relocating utilities. Cuts install time by 2/3. Paul blinked. That's not bad. Daniel straightened. Worked on something similar in Boston back when I was wearing a different shirt. What shirt was that? Madison asked. Project manager. Civil engineering. Before a bad lawsuit and a worse friend taught me humility, he said without bitterness. Now I mop floors and fix elevators, but the math still works. The conference line was silent for a beat, the engineer on the other end finally muttering, That could actually solve it. Paul was already scribbling notes. We'd need the calculations. Daniel shrugged. I can run them tonight if you want. No charge. Consider it a professional itch. Madison studied him, not the coveralls or the utility belt, but the unhurried certainty in his voice. Run them, she said. That evening, her inbox pinged at 9:17 p.m. The subject line read, "Riverton Load Transfer Preliminary." Attached was a PDF clean. Diagrams, precise formulas, annotated sketches. It was the kind of work you paid high-end consultants for, but with a clarity that spoke of field experience, not just theory. Beneath the calculations, a note. Madison, no guarantees. But this is the path I'd bet my own roof on. Daniel. 2 days later, Madison presented the adjusted plan to the City Review Board. They approved it on the spot. The Riverton deal was back in motion. When the news hit her desk, she didn't call Daniel to her office. She went to find him. She caught him in the sub-basement, checking a water line. "Riverton's approved," she said. He glanced up, one eyebrow lifting. "Good. That's one less building holding its breath. You just saved us millions," she said. He shook his head. "I just hated seeing a good project die of paperwork." Madison folded her arms. "Why didn't you ever go back to engineering?" Daniel leaned against the pipe he'd been tightening. "Because life isn't always linear. I had a son to raise, a legal mess to climb out of, and no appetite for partners who cut corners. Janitorial work is honest. No one lies to you about where the dirt is." There was a pause, the hum of the building around them. "You're wasted down here," Madison said. Daniel smiled faintly. "No. I'm just not where most people expect to find me." Before she could respond, Chloe's voice echoed from the stairwell. "Mom." Mr. Daniel Chloe appeared, clutching a sketch pad. "I drew the elevator we got stuck in, and a better one." Want to see Daniel crouched to look. "Nice. You gave it windows." "Everything feels safer with a view," Chloe said matter-of-factly. Madison saw the way Daniel looked at her daughter, not indulgent, not condescending, but as if her opinion was already worth listening to. It made something in her chest shift. That night, Madison sat at her kitchen counter, a mug of tea, cooling beside her laptop. She pulled up Daniel's email again, reading the note at the bottom. "The path I'd bet my own roof on." She thought of Chloe's sketch. She thought of Riverton's tenants who would have homes because a man in coveralls remembered how to read blueprints. And she thought, not for the first time, that some people were exactly where they needed to be, not because of the title on their shirt, but because of what they carried quietly until the right moment. Somewhere in the city, Daniel was probably tucking his son into bed. Madison closed the laptop and whispered into the empty room. "I see you, Brooks. Even if no one else does yet." And for the first time in weeks, the future felt less like a negotiation and more like a possibility. The rooftop bar of the Fairmont shimmered with glass and chrome, the kind of place where success came with a garnish. Madison's 5 candidates stood in a loose arc near the terrace rail, laughing in that practiced way that carried just enough to be overheard. She was late on purpose. Part of her wanted to see how they behaved when she wasn't in earshot. Chloe sat in the corner with her art supplies, sketching the skyline. Daniel, naturally, was nowhere on the guest list. This was meant to be an informal mixer, a chance to see the men interact, not a rescue mission. Still, Madison caught fragments of conversation that made her jaw tighten. "You can't tell me she's serious about giving the kid that much say," Grant Whitlow muttered, sipping his whiskey. "It's optics," Raphael replied. "The press loves a modern fairy tale, but a janitor. That's a headline you can't scrub." Louise Calder chuckled under his breath. "I heard he helped save Riverton. Probably thinks that buys him a seat at the table." Elliot Vance adjusted his cufflinks. "Saving a project doesn't mean you belong in the boardroom or the family. Those are different leagues." They didn't notice Madison had moved within earshot until Chloe's pencil stopped. The girl looked up, her voice clear and young, but unshakable. "Mr. Daniel fixes things people like you don't even see are broken." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Madison stepped in before anyone could recover. "Chloe, why don't you grab a soda from the bar?" she said gently. When Chloe was out of range, Madison turned to the men. "You're here because I believed each of you had the self-awareness to know this isn't just about me. If you can't respect the people my daughter respects, you've already lost." Elliot's jaw tightened. "We were just— I know exactly what you were— just—" Madison cut in. And for the record, Riverton's tenants will never know the difference between a boardroom league and a broom closet league. They'll just be grateful to have walls that stand. The air cooled. Madison walked away before the conversation could limp into apology. Downstairs in the lobby, she found Chloe in front of the fountain stirring ice in her soda with a straw. "They don't like him," Chloe said. It wasn't a question. "They don't know him," Madison replied. "They don't want to," Chloe countered. That last sentence lodged in Madison's mind like a stone in a shoe. She didn't shake it loose all evening. The next week, she caught Daniel on the mezzanine changing a flickering light. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. He glanced down from the ladder. "Sure. You want me to grab a coffee or a wrench?" "Neither," she said. "Just your time." They sat in the small staff lounge, the kind with vending machines that hum like old refrigerators. Madison told him about the rooftop, about Chloe's defense, about the way the room went cold. Daniel listened, leaning forward with his forearms on his knees. "Sounds like they're protecting their turf," he said finally. "It's more than turf. Some of them have pending deals with my company. If they think you're in the picture, they might see me differently." He gave a half smile. "Then I'd better stay out of the picture." Something in her tightened. "You think the answer to prejudice is disappearing?" "No." "I think the answer is choosing your battles," Daniel said. "You can't win every room at once, and some rooms aren't worth the rent." Madison studied him. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he admitted. "But I've been on job sites where the loudest guy was also the most useless. I learned to measure people by who's still holding the beam when everyone else steps back." That Friday, Madison took Chloe to the Riverwalk Fair. It was supposed to be just mother and daughter, but halfway through they spotted Ethan Daniel's son standing in line for the carousel. Daniel was beside him holding 2 corn dogs and looking almost sheepish. "Small City Madison," said when their eyes met. "Smaller fair," he replied. The kids were off in seconds negotiating who would get the purple horse. Madison and Daniel stood by the railing watching. "You know," Madison began, "Chloe's right. You do fix things people don't even see are broken." Daniel's eyes stayed on the carousel. "I don't do it for credit." "I know. That's what makes it dangerous for men like you. People think you don't mind being overlooked." He turned to her, then meeting her gaze fully. "And what do you think? I think some people are exactly where they need to be, until they're needed somewhere else." The carousel slowed. Chloe waved at her mother Ethan, grinning beside her. Madison saw something in the symmetry of that moment, 2 kids laughing, 2 adults standing guard, that unsettled her in the best possible way. But under the warm hum of the fair, the undercurrent from the rooftop still swirled. She knew those men would not simply vanish from her calendar. Their investments, their influence, their opinions, all were entangled with her professional world. And now, one of them she was certain would see Daniel not as a harmless bystander, but as a competitor. Madison looked at Daniel, who was listening intently to Ethan's story about a giant stuffed bear prize. He had no idea she thought that forces were already shifting under his feet. "Daniel," she said quietly, "if someone tried to make your life harder here, would you tell me?" He smirked faintly. "Depends. Are you asking as the CEO or as Chloe's mom?" "Both." "Then, yes," he said. "But only if I couldn't fix it myself first." Something about that answer, the quiet confidence, the lack of drama, lodged in her chest. Madison knew storms when she saw the clouds forming, and she could feel them gathering now somewhere just beyond the fairground lights. She also knew this the next time someone tried to diminish him in her presence, she wouldn't just walk away. Not when Chloe's words from the rooftop still echoed in her mind. "Mr. Daniel fixes things people like you don't even see are broken." The boardroom smelled faintly of rain and printer ink. The city skyline behind Madison washed in silver. She leaned over the Riverton blueprints, listening to Paul outline the revised construction schedule. The win from Daniel's solution still felt fresh, but in her world, victories had short shelf lives. "We're clear to move on permits," Paul said, tapping the paper, "but our material supplier is hesitating. They want confirmation on the courtyard drainage design." Madison exhaled a slow, controlled measure. "We'll give it to them. I'm not letting momentum die in committee." At that moment, her phone buzzed. Nora's name lit the screen. Need to talk now. They met in Madison's office, door closed, blinds angled. Nora's tone was low but sharp. Richard Evans was in HR this morning. He suggested strategic personnel reassignment for Daniel Brooks. Madison's brows knit. On what grounds, none stated. Just said it would be beneficial to operations if Daniel were transferred to the West Side property. Said he's too visible here. Too visible, Madison repeated, his exact words. Nora hesitated. West Side is an hour commute each way. It would take him out of Chloe's orbit entirely. Madison's stomach tightened. And HR's reaction. They're treating it as a routine request. You know how influence works here, Madison. Richard's got an equity stake in the Midtown Tower project. He's not someone they want to cross. Madison leaned back, her eyes narrowing. So this is how he plays it. Nora nodded. He sees Daniel as a threat to his business tie with you and maybe to something else. That evening in the parking garage, Madison spotted Daniel closing the back of his old pickup. He had a coil of industrial hose over one shoulder and a box of cleaning supplies in the other. "You're not leaving, are you?" she asked. "Not tonight," he said with a half-smile, "but they told me I'm getting reassigned to West Side starting next week." Her jaw clenched. "They told you why, just that I'm needed there more. I've heard that line before, usually means someone's uncomfortable with you being in the room." Daniel. "This isn't a coincidence." "I know," he said quietly, "but I'm not going to make your life harder by turning it into a fight. I've been on enough job sites to know when the politics outweigh the work." She stepped closer. "You're underestimating me if you think I'll just watch them push you out." He held her gaze for a beat, then shook his head with a wry grin. "You've got bigger fish to fry, Hale. Let me handle the mop water." "You're not mop water," she said more sharply than intended. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Then he nodded once and slid the box into the truck bed. "Thanks, but I'll be fine." The next day, Madison found Chloe in the penthouse kitchen, hunched over a paper schedule. "What's this?" Madison asked. "It's when I get to see Mr. Daniel," Chloe said matter-of-factly. "It's blank after next week. He said he's moving to another building." Madison's throat tightened. "It's complicated." "It's wrong," Chloe said. "If someone's good at their job and nice to people, you don't send them away. That's like firing the sun because you're mad about the heat." Madison crouched to meet her eyes. "Sometimes people make changes because they think it's safer for them." "Safer isn't always better," Chloe replied. "Better is when people like being where they are." By Friday, Madison had decided to check on the West Side property herself. Officially, it was to review a delayed renovation. Unofficially, she wanted to see what Daniel was being sent to. She found him in a dim boiler room, sleeves rolled up, coaxing a stubborn valve into cooperating. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, looking up. "Consider this a wellness visit," she replied. "Building's fine, just needs a little patience." They ended up in the staff cafeteria, long tables, buzzing vending machines, the smell of burnt coffee. Madison unwrapped a sandwich more for something to do than to eat. "You know," she began, "I've worked with a lot of people who think they're irreplaceable. They almost always are." Daniel smiled faintly. "And the ones who are irreplaceable, they don't think about it," she said. His smile faded into something softer. "It's not that I don't want to be here. I just don't want to be the reason you have to fight another battle." "You're not the reason," she said. "They are. You're just the excuse." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's a nice line. It's not a line, it's the truth." Their conversation was cut short when Chloe and Ethan appeared in the doorway, both carrying paper bags. "Surprise lunch delivery," Chloe announced. Madison blinked. "How did you?" "Ethan told me where the building was," Chloe said simply. "We took the subway. Don't worry, Mrs. Hale, we stayed together the whole time." Daniel sighed, half amused, half exasperated. "You two are trouble." "Good trouble," Chloe corrected. They sat together at one of the long tables. The kids traded snacks, Madison and Daniel talking in low tones between bites. There was a strange ease in the moment, 4 people, 2 conversations, 1 table that didn't feel like a workplace anymore. When they left, Madison caught Daniel's arm. "I'm not done with this," she said. I figured he replied. But as she walked out with Chloe, Madison realized something had shifted. Seeing Daniel here away from Midtown's marble and glass underscored the quiet resilience he carried. And she understood now this wasn't just about keeping him nearby for Chloe. It was about refusing to let the wrong people decide who belonged in her life. The war Richard thought he was winning had just been declared, and Madison Hale had no intention of losing. Rain slicked the sidewalks outside Hale Development, the kind of steady drizzle that blurred edges and made the city hum lower. Madison watched it from her office window, arms folded, jaw tight. The past week had been a lesson in quiet warfare, smiles in meetings, knives in the shadows. Nora walked in without knocking. "It's official," she said, dropping a printed memo on Madison's desk. Daniel's transfer order was processed this morning, effective Monday. Madison read the form. The words were clinical all-resource allocation and operational needs, but she could hear Richard Evans' voice behind every line. "Have you spoken to HR?" Madison asked. "They're in neutral facilitator mode," Nora said, which is code for Richard's got more leverage in this building than they want to challenge. Madison pushed the paper aside. "Then we'll find another way." Nora gave her a knowing look. "Be careful. They're watching for overreach. You can't make it look personal." Madison's voice was quiet but edged. "It is personal. They made it that way." That night, Madison drove to the West Side property under the pretense of inspecting progress on the renovation. The lobby smelled faintly of paint and old carpet. Daniel was there kneeling on a drop cloth replacing baseboard trim. He looked up surprised. "Didn't expect a CEO visit at 8 o'clock on a Friday. Consider it an inspection," she said. "Of the building or the staff?" he asked, half smiling. "Both," she replied. He stood wiping dust from his hands. "The place needs work, but it's solid. Kinda like me, I guess." Madison studied him for a moment. "You're taking this too calmly. I've been moved before," Daniel said. "When you work with a mop in one hand and a wrench in the other, you learn not to get too attached to a zip code." "That's not the point," she said. "You were moved because you're good at what you do, and because Chloe likes you. That combination scares some people." Daniel's gaze softened. "And you want to fight that battle?" "I don't want to," Madison said, "but I will." Saturday morning, Chloe sat at the kitchen island, a serious look on her face. She was holding a blank sheet of paper and a marker. "What are you drawing?" Madison asked, pouring coffee. "A schedule," Chloe said, "for seeing Mr. Daniel. He says he's moving buildings, but that doesn't mean we can't meet up." Madison took a seat. "It might be harder." Chloe's jaw set in a way that reminded Madison uncomfortably of herself. "Then we just try harder. You told me good people don't just disappear because it's inconvenient." Madison reached over and squeezed her hand. "I did say that." By noon, Chloe had a plan, a subway route, a list of weekend activities Daniel and Ethan might like, and a column for ice cream opportunities. Madison couldn't help but smile at the precision. Later that day, Madison's phone buzzed with a message from Nora Richards boasting to a contact that he handled the janitor problem. Madison read it twice, feeling something cold settle behind her ribs. Sunday afternoon, Madison drove Chloe to a midtown cafe under the guise of a mother-daughter outing. As they approached, Chloe spotted Ethan through the window. Moments later, Daniel emerged from the counter with 2 hot chocolates. His surprise at seeing them was obvious, but not unwelcome. "This is turning into a pattern," Daniel said. "Good patterns are worth keeping," Chloe replied. They sat at a corner table. The kids compared school projects while Madison leaned in toward Daniel. "You know what Richard's saying?" she asked quietly. Daniel's expression didn't change. "Let me guess that moving me was an operational decision." His exact words, "handled the janitor problem." Daniel took a slow sip of coffee. "Sounds like he's more afraid of a mop than he should be." Madison's voice dropped. "This isn't just about you. It's about who gets to decide who belongs in my world." Daniel met her eyes. "And what if belonging comes with a cost you don't want to pay?" "Then I decide if it's worth it," she said. He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the kids. They already decided. When it was time to leave, the four of them walked out together into the cool air. The city felt different at that moment, smaller, like it could fit inside the warmth of that table they'd just left. Back in the car, Chloe leaned her head against the window. "You're not going to let them send him away, are you?" Madison glanced at her in the rearview mirror, not without a fight. That night, in the quiet of her apartment, Madison opened her laptop. She began drafting a memo not to HR, not to the board, but to herself. This isn't about a transfer. It's about influence. Influence that assumes I will choose comfort over conviction. They're wrong. She sat back reading it once more before closing the file. Outside, the rain had stopped and the city lights reflected on the wet streets like promises she intended to keep. The next week, Monday morning, arrived with its usual flood of emails. But one stood out in Madison's inbox, an invitation to a charity weekend at the Lakeshore Retreat hosted by a group of investors, including Richard Evans. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind already working. If they wanted to play on their turf, maybe it was time she brought her own storm to the table. And when she did, she knew exactly who she wanted standing quietly at her side, mop wrench and all. Midtown Tower. Atrium drawings are missing. The sentence hit Madison's Monday like a fire alarm. Nora stood in her doorway, face composed, voice not. Missing where Madison asked. From the project chair, Nora said, "The final revision set. Richard flagged it at 7:10 a.m. Says we've got a breach." Madison's fingers tightened on the pen. "Who has access?" "Senior team, plus facilities for logistics. That includes Daniel." Of course it did. Madison rose. "Getty and legal." By 9:00, the executive conference room was full. IT director with a laptop, glowing blue HR with a legal pad. Richard Evans in a suit that knew how expensive it looked. He stood to greet Madison as if this were a polite breakfast. "Unfortunate," he said, hands open. "But we need swift action. Those drawings are proprietary. Any leak jeopardizes the capital stack." IT pulled up logs. At 6:41 p.m., Friday document, Atrium at Rev C Final, was moved to a local folder on a removable drive. User credential R. Need Evans. He clicked. At 6:43 p.m., same credential moved it back. At 6:48, different credential D. Brooks accessed the shared directory. Richard smiled without smiling. There you have it. The janitor browsed a folder he had no business in. HR looked at Madison. "We need to suspend Mr. Brooks pending investigation. Due process, of course." Madison kept her voice level. "We don't punish access, we punish intent." Richard spread his hands. Intent. He was seen near the server closet. Night crew badge logs put him on that floor. "Because he cleans it," Madison said. Richard's tone softened theatrically. "Madison, I respect your personal considerations, but this is about safeguarding assets. I don't mix personal with assets," she said, "and my consideration is this company's integrity." HR cleared her throat. "We'll place Mr. Brooks on paid leave for 72 hours. Standard." Madison exhaled. A standard that tasted like something else. "Fine," she said. "But pull full revision history. I want every touch, every minute stamp. And ask security to preserve camera footage for Friday 6 to 7 p.m. Richard nodded as if he'd suggested it. Daniel didn't fight the suspension. In the facilities office, he folded the notice once then again until the paper was sturdy in his palm. "I didn't take anything," he said quietly. "I know Madison said." That folder he started then stopped as if deciding which hill to die on. "I check deliveries to make sure the night shifts don't misplace boxes. That's the only reason I even saw project names on that screen." "You don't owe me a defense," Madison said. He gave her a look with a rueful corner in it. "Feels like I do." "Let me do my job," she said. "You do yours. Even if right now your job is waiting." He tucked the paper away. "Waiting's still a verb," he said. That afternoon, Chloe sat cross-legged in Madison's office, sketchpad open. Ethan perched beside her. It wasn't ideal to have them here. Madison's day was a weather map of storms, but their presence steadied the air. Is Mr. Daniel in trouble? Chloe asked. For now, he's resting, Madison said, careful with words. Adults always give naps to the truth. Ethan murmured, focused on a doodle of a toolbox. Madison blinked. What did you say? He glanced up. On Friday, my dad was showing me his tablet while we waited for the subway. His sync app popped a banner like a little toast. It said, Atrium Rev C Final, updated by R. Evans, 6:42 p.m. I remember because I said, what's an atrium? And he said, a fancy word for tall air. He laughed. Chloe nodded. I drew a tall air. Madison stood so fast her chair nudged the rug. Ethan, are you sure about the time? He looked hurt. I'm not a liar. I didn't say you were. She crouched. Sometimes 1 minute is the difference between a mistake and a plan. He considered. It was dark outside, but not night-night, and the train was late. Madison turned to Nora, who had been standing with arms folded. Get it to pull external sync notifications. If a personal device was subscribed to the public read-only project feed, it should have seen the version event. Ethan's eyes widened. Am I in trouble? You might be the reason a good man keeps his job, Madison said. Chloe leaned toward him. Told you we were good trouble. By evening, the IT director returned with a drive. Found mirrored events, he said. Friday, 6:41 to 6:43 p.m. Document moved off and back on by E.R.T. Evans. A read-only, watcher unknown device received the update, ping. Also, camera footage shows Mr. Evans entering the server room at 6:39 with his assistant. He reported the breach Monday morning. Madison's jaw worked. And Mr. Brooks. The IT director scrolled. He authenticated on the floor at 6:48. No file downloads. His account permissions are clean. Nora sighed. So, Richard moved the file. Moved it back then, cried Wolf. Classic pretext. Madison spoke carefully. You do not say that outside this room. Not yet. She called HR. Pause the suspension. Effective immediately. On what basis, HR asked. On the basis that I said so and I sign your budget, Madison replied, then softened. And on the basis of new information. Legal has it. She hung up, then stared out at the city until the skyline steadied. The confrontation when it came did not happen in a boardroom. It happened at the lakeshore retreat in a lodge that smelled like cedar and strategy. Investors milled servers moved like chess pieces and a quartet made Vivaldi feel like good behavior. Richard found Madison at the window. Glad you came, he said smoothly. We can discuss next steps on Midtown Tower, assuming we still have our arms around the drawings. We do, Madison said. Thanks to meticulous logs. He lifted a brow. Ah. She didn't ease him in. E.T. pulled camera footage. You accessed the server room. Friday night moved the file, moved it back then raised a flag to HR Monday. It's all time-stamped. Richard's smile thinned. We all move files, and I flagged an irregularity. That's diligence. What you flagged Madison said was a mess you made to justify removing a man who bothers your narrative. He chuckled, the sound dry. You're reading novels into audits. And you're underestimating how well I read, she said. He stepped closer, voice lowering. Madison, off the record. Your affection for the janitor is blurring your governance. Investors don't like blurred lines. Investors prefer lines that are honest, she said. Here's an honest one. If you ever manipulate my staff again to secure proximity to my decisions, you will find yourself very far from all of them. Richard's face studied hers, looking for a bluff. Be careful not to make this personal, he murmured. It became personal when you tried to make my daughter's safe person look dangerous, she replied. He held her gaze a second longer, then tipped his glass as if conceding a small point in a large game. I'm sure legal will enjoy the exercise. They already are, Madison said. She walked away before triumph could sour into gloating. Outside, night gathered on the lake like a listening ear. Daniel showed up at headquarters Tuesday morning because he didn't know what else to do, and because work is where his hands made sense. Madison met him by the service elevator. "It's paused," she said. "The suspension." He nodded, cautious. "Because you said so, because the facts, did she said, and because a kid remembered the difference between 6:42 and 6:43. A smile pulled at his mouth. Ethan. Ethan. Daniel's shoulders dropped a fraction, the week's weight sliding to the floor between them. "I don't like being a problem you have to solve." "You're not," she said. "You're the problem some people didn't expect me to notice." He considered that, then shook his head with a small, disbelieving laugh. "You really are dangerous." "Only to lies," she said. He glanced down the hallway. "So, where do you want me?" Madison thought of Richard's glittering lobby, his careful sentences, the way he'd tried to turn integrity into optics. Then she thought of Chloe's steady hand, Ethan's careful memory, and a building that had been waiting for its bones to make sense. "Right where you were," she said. "Visible." He nodded. "Okay." As he turned to go, Madison added almost as an afterthought, "And Daniel, thank you for waiting like it was a verb." He smiled without turning. Slow is smart. When he disappeared into the hum of the building, Madison stood still, listening to the way the air changed when something true was put back where it belonged. Outside, the lake would be folding itself into morning. Inside, a different kind of tide had turned, and somewhere she knew the next move was already being arranged. But now, at least the table was level. The invitation came wrapped in the kind of formality Daniel had learned to distrust. A white envelope with the Hale Properties seal his name in precise looping handwriting. When he opened it in the maintenance break room, Ethan leaned over his shoulder. "What's that?" Daniel hesitated. "An invitation. From Mrs. Hale." Ethan's eyes widened. "Like a date?" "No," Daniel said firmly, tucking the letter back into the envelope. "It says, 'A weekend at the Hudson Lake Resort as a gesture of gratitude for your help to the company.'" Ethan grinned. "Still sounds like a date." Friday afternoon, the drive up to the lake was quiet at first. Chloe sat beside Madison in the SUV, and Ethan sat next to Daniel in the back. Snow-tipped pines lined the road. Madison broke the silence. "I hope you don't feel pressured to be here. I just thought, after everything, it might be good to step away from offices and boardrooms." Daniel gave a short nod. "I'm not sure I belong in a place like this." Madison glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Then you haven't seen what matters here." The resort was the kind of picture-perfect luxury Madison's world was built on. Yet, the moment they checked in, she insisted on ditching the formal dinner for a walk by the frozen lake. The kids ran ahead, their laughter skipping across the ice-crusted air. "You work too much," Daniel said quietly. She smiled without looking at him. "You sound like Chloe. Maybe she's right." Madison turned to him, then her eyes softening. "I've been told that before. But work is how I've kept control, how I've protected her." Daniel's gaze followed Chloe and Ethan, who were trying to skip stones across the frozen surface. "Control's an illusion. You can only hold so much before your hands get tired." The words landed heavier than she expected, like truth she'd been avoiding. That night, they gathered in the lodge's common area. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, the scent of cedar thick in the air. Madison sat on the rug, Chloe curled against her side, while Ethan built a small tower of wooden blocks. "Uncle Daniel," Chloe called suddenly. "Your turn." Daniel looked up from his coffee. "My turn for what?" "To build something," she said, holding out a block. "But it has to be a bridge, like the ones in your stories." He crouched down beside them, his big hands surprisingly gentle as he began. "A bridge has to be strong here." He tapped the center, but flexible here. "Like people," Chloe asked. Daniel paused, meeting her gaze. "Exactly like people." Madison watched the exchange, her chest tightening at how naturally he spoke to her daughter, as if he'd known her all her life. The next day brought sledding snowball fights and a small disaster when Ethan's sled veered off course. Daniel sprinted across the slope, scooping his son up before he hit the tree line. "You okay?" Daniel asked, breathless. Ethan grinned, brushing snow from his hair. "You're fast." Madison arrived seconds later, worry etched deep. Daniel gave her a quick nod. "He's fine." Her relief was immediate but unspoken. Still, she caught the way Chloe slipped her mitten into Daniel's hand as they walked back. That evening, after the kids had fallen asleep in their adjoining rooms, Madison found Daniel out on the balcony, hands in his jacket pockets, breath misting in the cold. "You kept your distance all weekend," she said. He didn't turn to face her. "Because this isn't my world, Madison, and when this weekend's over, you'll go back to yours." She stepped closer. "And what if I don't want to?" Daniel finally looked at her, the shadows of the lantern light cutting across his face. "Then you'd have to ask yourself if you're ready for everything that comes with me. And I'm not talking about the good parts." Her voice softened. I've already seen the important parts." The last morning as they packed, Chloe whispered to Madison, "I wish every weekend could be like this." Madison kissed her forehead. "Me too, sweetheart." But she knew as the SUV rolled away from the resort that something fundamental had shifted. The weekend had been meant as a test. Instead, it had quietly rewritten the terms of what she wanted, and maybe what she needed. And though Daniel kept his eyes on the road, she noticed the smallest curve of a smile at the corner of his mouth. The ballroom of the Hale Tower was dressed for elegance, white orchids in tall crystal vases, gold-trimmed chairs, soft piano music weaving between hushed conversations. But tonight's purpose wasn't a corporate gala or charity auction. Tonight was personal. For 4 weeks, Madison had danced on the edge of two worlds: the polished circle of New York's most eligible bachelors and the quiet, unassuming presence of a janitor who didn't belong in any of them and yet somehow belonged everywhere that mattered. She had told herself the event was to formalize her choice that the presence of reporters and the board was simply for optics. But as she stepped onto the small stage looking out at the candidates, she knew she'd built a stage for something she couldn't fully control. Richard was there, of course, in his navy three-piece suit, smile sharp as glass. The doctor, the architect, the financier, all perfectly prepared. Daniel was near the back, a little apart from the crowd, wearing his best shirt, the one Ethan had ironed this morning. He didn't meet her eyes. Chloe sat at a table to the right, legs swinging under her dress, Ethan beside her, whispering something that made her smile. Madison took a breath. Tonight, she began, her voice calm but steady, is about possibility. About what it means to build a life, not just a career, not just a reputation, but a family. She gestured for the candidates to speak. One by one, they stepped up. The financier began, voice smooth as silk. "Madison, I can offer stability. With my network, the Hale legacy could triple in the next decade." The doctor followed. "I can offer health care and a home where Chloe will always be safe." The architect spread his hands. "I can help you design the future both in concrete and in the life we share." Richard's turn came last among them. "Madison," he said, his eyes flicking toward Daniel for a fraction of a second, "I understand the demands of your world. I can stand beside you in every deal, every boardroom. Together, we could be untouchable." Each one spoke like they were pitching a merger. Chloe's expression didn't change. Then Madison asked Chloe, "Would you like to share your thoughts?" A ripple of polite surprise ran through the room. Chloe stood smoothing the skirt of her dress. Her voice was small at first, but clear. "I listened to everyone she said, and I think you're all nice." Soft chuckles. But Chloe continued, her gaze moving from face to face. Everyone talked about what they can give to Mom. No one talked about what they'd be like as a dad. The room stilled. "I don't need someone who can make our company bigger. I need someone who makes our family better. Someone who can make pancakes on Sunday and fix a squeaky door and tell me when I'm wrong. Someone like—" She turned, scanning the crowd, and walked toward the back. "Like Ethan's dad." The air thickened. All eyes followed her as she stopped in front of Daniel. "Mr. Brooks," she said, using the formal tone she'd heard adults use in meetings. "Would you come here?" Daniel froze. "Chloe, please." He moved slowly, like a man walking into the center of a storm. Chloe took his hand and led him to the stage. She faced the room again. "I don't need a vision statement," she said simply. "I just need this." She squeezed his hand. Gasps, whispers, camera flashes. Madison stood motionless, her pulse loud in her ears. Richard broke the silence. "With all due respect, Madison, is this the image you want to project? A CEO choosing a janitor as a life partner?" Madison's head turned sharply. "Richard, I think you're mistaking an image for a life." His smile faltered. She looked at Daniel, then really looked at him. The quiet strength in his eyes, the way he hadn't tried to defend himself, the way Chloe's hand rested in his like it had always been there. In that moment, the noise of the room fell away. 4 weeks ago, Madison said, stepping closer to them, "I thought this was about finding someone who fit my world." But Chloe's right. It's about finding someone who fits our life. She turned to the crowd. "Daniel Brooks has done more for my family and my company in 4 weeks than most could in 4 years. He's saved contracts, solved problems, and shown my daughter that kindness is strength." Her voice softened. "And somewhere along the way, he reminded me of something I'd forgotten, what it feels like to trust someone completely." A hush held the room. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Madison, are you sure I've never been surer?" Chloe beamed. Ethan's grin was wide enough to light the stage. It wasn't the ending Madison had planned for this night. It wasn't even the kind of ending that made sense on paper. But as she reached for Daniel's hand, the flashbulbs erupted, and for the first time in years, she didn't care how the headlines would read. Because this wasn't a business decision. It was the beginning of a life. The morning after the decision day felt less like a victory and more like stepping into a storm. Madison's phone buzzed without pause. Texts, emails, missed calls. Headlines were already everywhere. Hale Harris chooses janitor. Over billionaire suitors. Romance or recklessness. Madison Hale's surprising pick. By 9 a.m., the conference room on the 42nd floor was filled with the Hale board of directors, every face tight with disapproval. Madison, Margaret the board chair, began without preamble. "The optics of this are problematic. Investors are concerned." One of the older members leaned forward. "We've worked decades to build a brand synonymous with prestige. Your personal life is now a trending topic and not in a good way." Madison folded her hands on the table, calm but unyielding. "You're concerned about prestige. I'm concerned about integrity. Those two are not the same." "Integrity," Richard scoffed from his seat near the end, "doesn't sign contracts. Image does. Public perception can tank stock value faster than a recession." Margaret's tone softened but was no less firm. "No one's asking you to end anything immediately, but reconsider the public nature of it. At least distance yourself for now." Madison looked around the table. "Distance myself from a man who saved this company twice in a month, from someone my daughter trusts more than anyone." "That's what you're suggesting." No one met her eyes. The pressure didn't stop at the boardroom. Outside the building, cameras waited. Social media was split, half skeptical, half enchanted. But the skepticism was loudest in the places that mattered for business. By noon, she sat in her office, staring at the city skyline, knowing the easy choice would be to retreat. That's what they all expected, a graceful PR pivot, a polite fade-out. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Darling Evelyn's voice was gentle but probing. "You've worked so hard for your place in this world. Don't throw it away for sentiment." Madison closed her eyes. "It's not sentiment, Mother. It's truth. Daniel is—" She stopped herself. "He's not the risk. Losing myself again is the risk." Evelyn sighed. "Then you'd better be ready to defend him in a way no one can twist." The opportunity came faster than expected. The next morning, a reporter from the New York Chronicle requested a live press conference, offering to let her set the record straight. Her PR team advised against it. "You'll just give more oxygen to the story," they warned. But Madison had made her decision. At exactly 2 p.m., she stepped up to the podium in the Hale Tower lobby, dozens of microphones aimed her way. the room crowded with press employees and board members, Margaret and Richard among them. She began with the simplest truth. "Many of you have questions," Madison said, her voice steady but warm. "Questions about why a woman in my position would choose to be with someone like Daniel Brooks." A murmur swept through the room. She didn't flinch. "Let me tell you about Daniel. He's a single father who's raised his son to be kind, curious, and brave. He's a man who, in the middle of his own setbacks, found ways to help others. Ways that saved my company not once, but twice. He's not a janitor because that's all he can be. He's a janitor because he refused to let a wrongful lawsuit take his integrity along with his career." She let the words hang there. Cameras clicked furiously. "I've spent years in rooms where people measure worth by net worth. But I've learned, thanks to Daniel and my daughter, that the truest measure of a person is how they treat those who can do nothing for them." Her gaze swept the crowd, pausing on Richard just long enough for the meaning to sink in. "I'm not here to defend my choice as a CEO. I'm here to stand by my choice as a human being. And if the cost of that is some investors walking away, then they're not the partners we need." The hush that followed wasn't silence. It was the sound of a narrative shifting. A hand went up from the press pool. "Ms. Hale, are you saying you're officially in a relationship with Mr. Brooks?" Madison smiled a small, unshakable smile. "I'm saying that in a world obsessed with power, I'm choosing partnership, and yes, I'm choosing him." Somewhere in the back, she caught sight of Daniel, half-hidden Ethan beside him. His expression wasn't pride or embarrassment, it was something deeper, gratitude. When the press conference ended, Margaret approached her in the corridor. "You realize you've just made it harder for all of us." Madison didn't slow her stride. "Or maybe I made it easier for the ones who still remember why we built this company in the first place." Later that evening, Daniel called. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied, "I did. Because if I won't stand up for the people who matter most, then all the standing I've done in boardrooms means nothing." There was a pause, then his voice softened. "You know, you've just made it impossible for me to keep my distance." She laughed. Good. It wasn't the end of the storm. But for the first time, Madison realized she didn't need the storm to end, she just needed to know who would stand with her in it. The spring air in upstate New York carried the faint sweetness of blooming lilacs drifting over the Hale family's countryside home. A small, white tent stood in the backyard, draped with strings of fairy lights swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. There was no ballroom, no hundreds of guests, just family, a handful of close friends, and a promise that mattered more than any headline ever could. Madison smoothed the fabric of her simple ivory dress as she looked at herself in the mirror. It wasn't couture. It wasn't meant to be. This was the dress she'd chosen for the life she wanted to live, one where authenticity had replaced appearances. Evelyn stepped into the room, eyes soft. "I don't think I've ever seen you look this happy." Madison smiled, adjusting the delicate pearl bracelet on her wrist. "That's because I'm not dressing for the world today. I'm dressing for the people who've become my world." Outside, Daniel stood under the tent wearing a navy suit that fit like it had been made for him, not in some luxury atelier, but by a local tailor who knew his story. Ethan tugged at his sleeve, straightening the boutonniere with exaggerated precision. "You nervous, Dad?" Ethan asked. Daniel chuckled. "I've built skyscrapers and dismantled HVAC systems in the middle of summer without breaking a sweat. But this has me shaking." Ethan grinned. "Don't worry, she already chose you." Daniel crouched so they were eye level. "That's the thing, buddy. Choosing each other isn't a one-time thing. It's something you keep doing every single day." The music began soft piano chords, and everyone turned as Chloe stepped into the aisle first, wearing a pale blue dress and carrying a small bouquet. Her smile was brighter than the fairy lights overhead. Ethan joined her halfway down, offering his arm with the awkward gallantry only an 8-year-old could pull off. Then Madison appeared. Daniel felt the breath catch in his chest. It wasn't the dress, the sunlight catching her hair, or even the way her eyes locked on his. It was the quiet certainty in her steps, as if each one was a vow in itself. When she reached him, neither spoke right away. The officiant's voice was a gentle hum in the background, but for a moment all they heard was the sound of their own hearts catching up to everything that had led here. Daniel Madison began when it was her turn, her voice steady but rich with feeling. When we met, I thought I was looking for someone who could help me build the life I thought I wanted. What I didn't know was that you would help me build the life I truly needed. You've shown me that home isn't about walls or location, it's about the people inside it. And I promise to protect that, to protect us every day. Daniel's voice was lower, thick with emotion. Madison. I thought I had lost everything that defined me, but then I realized what defines you isn't what you've built, it's who you stand beside when the walls fall. You've stood beside me, and today I stand beside you. And I promise, no matter what storms come, you'll never face them alone. They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that held no diamonds but carried the weight of every choice that had brought them here. Chloe and Ethan clapped first, starting a ripple of applause that spread through the small crowd. The rest of the afternoon was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the easy chaos of children darting between tables. Madison caught Daniel more than once with his hand resting lightly on Ethan's shoulder, or leaning in to listen to Chloe's endless stories about her latest school project. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a family settling into the shape it was always meant to have. As the sun dipped, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold, Daniel slipped away for a moment and returned with a small wooden box. "It's not a wedding gift," he said, handing it to Madison. "It's something I've been working on since the day I knew we'd get here." Inside was a letter neatly folded, resting on top of a simple document. Madison unfolded it. The Brooks Hale Scholarship Fund, dedicated to providing opportunities for people who had faced unjust losses but wanted to rebuild their lives. Madison's eyes welled. "You kept saying you wanted to give back. You didn't tell me you'd already started." Daniel smiled. "I wanted it to be ours, not just mine." Later that night, the four of them stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, preparing a late dinner because the catered food had long since disappeared under the enthusiasm of their guests. Chloe chopped tomatoes with exaggerated seriousness while Ethan stirred sauce with the focus of a scientist. At one point, Chloe looked up and said with a grin, "You know, I think I picked pretty well." Madison laughed, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Yes, you did. Better than I ever could have on my own." Daniel glanced at Ethan. "And I'd say I did pretty well too." Ethan, without looking up from the sauce, said, "Told you she'd choose you." The kitchen was filled with the clatter of dishes, the scent of fresh basil, and the sound of voices overlapping in easy rhythm. It was nothing grand, nothing headline-worthy, and yet in that small, ordinary moment, it was everything. As they sat down together, Madison felt the truth settle deep inside her titles. Wealth and prestige had never been the foundation she was looking for. Love, respect, and honesty were, and with those they had built something unshakable. In the soft glow of the kitchen lights, with laughter spilling into the night, their story didn't feel like it was ending. It felt like it was just beginning. Status doesn't build a family, love does. Respect holds it together, and honesty makes it a home. Sometimes life doesn't give us what we planned. It gives us what we truly need. Madison thought she was searching for the perfect candidate. Daniel thought his best chapters were behind him, but together they learned that family isn't built by status or titles, it's built by love, by respect, and by the quiet decision to choose each other every single day. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what part of this story touched your heart the most? Your thoughts and experiences matter, and I'd love to read them in the comments below. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply made you believe in love a little more, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next journey we share together. Thank you truly for spending this time with me today. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love and in the beauty of the family you choose.